Hi, everyone. Welcome to Interchange. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us. We are going to spend most of this year-end show talking about what's happened in the aftermath of the horrible shooting at the elementary school in Connecticut. It's just too important not to talk about. So let me introduce everyone. We have longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally, Kevin Fischer, former broadcast journalist, political analyst, and oftentimes a fill-in host. You hear him over on WISN Talk Radio. You know Denise Callaway, community affairs and public relations professional. And of course, Gerard Randall, education consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz is going to be along with commentary at the end of the show. It's been a week that has changed this country forever. Just as 9/11 did, just as the Oklahoma City bombing did, no one will ever forget it. A gunman in Connecticut killed 20 children and 6 adults. The president has promised that concrete steps will be taken. Proposed solutions have ranged from more gun control to more guns. Some say we have to arm every single teacher or at least have an armed guard in every single school. Some say we have to do more to address the problems of the mentally ill so that they don't reach the point of going on a rampage. What do you think the end result will be? And then what will we say here the next time someone shoots up a school, a college campus, a movie theater, or a place of worship?
It'll probably be more of the same. I don't know how much action we're going to get on gun control laws. I think the passion of the moment is to have those who are advocates for more possession of guns and those who are advocates for gun control to say what they want to say once they now have platforms to say it. But I don't see any significant coming together. Certainly not at the state level. I don't think there's going to be any at the federal level for significant gun control. I do believe that we ought to invest more in supporting the needs of those who have mental illness. I don't think we do enough there, and we've certainly flipped back and forth in Milwaukee County as to how we're going to best treat those who have mental illness. And all along that process, we really haven't devoted the kinds of resources that we really need to devote to it. So I don't see much change happening there. I do think that large urban school districts, though, at the K-12 level, probably have the best experience at being able to provide safe havens for students because they deal with it every day. But even there, resources are needed in order for them to be able to ramp up safety in those buildings.
Denise, all the gun laws in the world wouldn't have stopped this guy in Connecticut, would they?
I don't know that because we don't know if we would have had stricter gun laws, if he would have had access to the automatic weapon, that rifle that killed all those children. I don't think we can say that if we would have had wouldn't have had stricter gun laws, that this wouldn't have happened. To me, the challenge that we have as a nation is, when is enough enough? When do we take a look at the laws that we have on the books, both as it relates to gun control and as it relates to the treatment of the mentally ill? When do we say we need to change both of those things? I cannot think of a legitimate reason that anyone needs to have the kind of weapon that that young man had when he went to that school in Connecticut. You're not going to use it for hunting. You're not going to fire off 300 rounds, in a minute, and there's not going to be anything left to Bambi if that's really what you're hunting. These are weapons of mass human destruction. And as a society, it is in part how I think we are judged. If we think that it's acceptable for citizens to be able to buy the kinds of weapons that most countries use to arm their military, I think that's a problem. And I think we also need to take a look at not just making more healthcare services available to the mentally ill. We have to work as a country to begin to remove that stigma of mental illness. People in some communities, in some parts of our nation, there is a real reluctance to admit that people in your family, people in your community have a problem that is mental illness. And until we're able to make strides in both of those areas, I'm so worried that we are going to be sitting back here 3 months from now, 2 months from now, maybe a month from now, talking about another circumstance where innocent lives have been lost by somebody using an Army or military grade weapon in a civilian community.
Kevin, the NRA was pretty quiet for a week, but then kind of shocked everybody today when they came out and said one of the answers might be to have an armed guard in every single school in America.
Well, that would be a deterrent. No question about it, because a bad guy is going to think more than twice about barreling into a school if a trained, armed police officer is waiting for him at the front door. But I understand that if you suggest that, it raises all kinds of red flags, especially among parents who really don't want their children to go to school in an environment where you've got armed people. MPS has all kinds of security, and you mentioned that kind of district is accustomed to handling these kinds of situations, but they're unarmed. You start putting armed people in schools, and you're going to have all kinds of questions about, well, cost for one thing, and now you're taking police officers off the street. It certainly would work. I absolutely believe that, but I understand all the kinds of concerns and it would raise.
And it's expensive. The price
Very
tag,
expensive.
the price tag that the National School Safety Association put on that today is at least $80,000 an officer. And then what do? You've got them in schools, so these folks then decide, I'll move to a mall, I'll move to a movie theater, I'll try a church or a synagogue.
It's on the table. Everything's on the table, it seems, this week. I would think that would be a question for each individual school district to address, whether it wants to go that route and whether it can afford to go that route. I don't think gun control, the question you put to Denise, I don't think gun control laws will work. A Gallup poll survey this week showed that most people think that the emphasis should be on mental health and not the gun. You had strict gun control laws in Connecticut where that weapon, the killer tried to get weapons just before he went on the rampage, couldn't do it, he was denied, but his mother had the weapon and he got a hold of it and went into the school. And then the Connecticut law was very similar to the federal assault weapon ban that was instituted many years ago. You can't strip away the constitutional rights of millions of law-abiding gun owners because you are naturally horrified at what happened this week. In fact, all the solutions talked about impinge on some constitutional rights. Gun control.
No, they don't.
Second Amendment. Mental,
No, they don't.
mental health. Mental health.
I would like to have
mental health.
Have a
We've got
little time here in a minute.
Involuntarily committing people that may have mental health issues. That's the Liberty Clause of the Fifth Amendment. Going after these extreme violent video games that kids are growing up with and are shooting with cyber triggers and killing with no harm or repercussion for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Law enforcement will tell you that weighs heavily on what's going on, and that's an impingement on the First Amendment. And psychologists this week have said, we have no clue. We can't predict who's going to go off and be the next shooter. And so I don't see any real, solid, effective solution.
How do we address the mental health aspect of it? This family, obviously, they had the money and the access to mental health experts.
I will talk about that, but I have to talk about what both of these gentlemen have said, because unfortunately on this show, the two Republican representatives are not really representative of what I'm hearing from a lot of Republicans. I am much more hopeful right now, and it's not a fleeting thing because of this horrible tragedy. I am much more hopeful right now of something actually happening regarding guns than I've ever been in my life. And the reason for that is several reasons. Some of them relate to Republicans and some of them relate to our president. First of all, our president just got reelected for his final term, and he is his first act in his new presidency has not just put this on the table to talk about, he has made this a #1 priority for concrete action. And we've never had a president willing to do that, who has just been elected with a huge electoral majority, willing to stand up to the NRA, which is responsible for most of the bad gun laws we have. Mm-hmm. But the other really positive thing is I am seeing Republicans coming forward for the first time to have the guts to also say it doesn't make any sense to have, as Denise says, military weapons in the hands of civilians. And that's got nothing to do with the Constitution. It's got nothing to do with gun rights. There is no constitutional amendment guaranteeing citizens a right to mass murder. And that's all these weapons are created for. They're created for a battlefield. They're not created for the streets of our cities, for the streets of our cities and for our schools and our temples and our churches and our streets. They're absolutely not. James Sensenbrenner, one of the most right-wing congressmen in this area and in the United States, I heard say he agrees with President Obama that no law can take care of all of these problems, but that we certainly are not doing enough, and he's willing to get behind an effort to start doing more.
Well, I think
Now, you talked for a long time. I got to get to the mental health side of it too.
Well, you only got a half an hour.
Yeah, you did that already. The mental health side of it, here's what I'm concerned about. I'm very positive about the gun side because thoughtful conservatives, it's not just liberals. Our silly sheriff came out with a ridiculous proposal to have armed guards in every public place in America, which would certainly, end the unemployment problem, but also turn America into a police state. It's not, and he accused liberals of trying to pass this off. It's not liberals, it's conservatives, it's thoughtful people all across the political spectrum who say, this is insane. Not only the Christmas time murder of these 20 children and teachers, but everything that's happened this year, making it, where month after month after month we've had mass murders, and people are willing to say no other civilized country in the world would allow this, and it's ridiculous that we do. Here's my concern about mental health, and most of the conservatives who don't want to do anything about guns, and I think that's just a cruel and ugly position, who don't want to do a thing.
So we're supposed to just sit here and listen to this?
No, I sat and listened to you. Now let me say this about mental health. Let me say this about mental health. The thing I'm most worried about mental health is, Denise said we've got to remove the stigma. It seems to me like that what the gun aficionados are trying to do is put more stigma on mental illness, to suggest that it's the mentally ill who are dangerous in our society, and therefore, rather than talking about treatment, we're going to have to be locking up, more and more people who are mentally ill. We already use our jails and prisons for the mentally ill. That is insane. These people need treatment, or they need treatment in the community. It's a very small minority of mentally ill people who are ever violent.
Is Obama going to be successful?
And again, I get back to, Joel, you may have been hearing things that certainly I haven't been hearing. I had a conversation just today with one of the members of the Republican Senate. There's not going to be a whole heck of a lot of movement towards putting more restrictions on gun possession. I just don't see that.
In the state you're talking about?
In the state.
I'm talking about the federal laws level that the president is getting this nation behind.
And at the federal level, I think it might be promising that Jim Sensenbrenner, who also sits on the Judiciary Committee, at one time had been chair, that he would back something, but what is that something? And that something might not be the kind of restrictions on gun possession that some have been calling for, which the NRA would certainly go full battle to prevent.
I wish we could have a circumstance where we would say we would also be willing to go full battle to prevent the deaths of more children. And we're not as a country. We're not. We're more than happy to argue about whether or not the ability to have a military-style weapons violates someone's Second Amendment right. And we don't seem to be nearly as concerned about the rights that our children and our families and our communities should have to be able to live without fear of gun violence. We're more than happy to say it's okay to put armed police officers in schools, and as the sheriff suggested, every public place. But we won't take one step, not one small step, some politicians refuse to, that will do something to control the proliferation of these incredibly violent and massively destructive
Nor should we,
weapons.
because
we
they're not effective.
Should. We absolutely should. That is
We've
not
never
true.
done it. How do we know
That
if they're
is not
effective?
true.
Pro-gun Democrat Dianne Feinstein has flip-flopped now, and she has introduced a bill that would ban certain so-called assault weapons. There's
They
hundreds.
are assault weapons. If you don't think so, look at Sandy Hook and tell me what that was.
There are hundreds of exceptions, loopholes in Feinstein's own bill. She's watering
Hasn't even written
down,
the bill
she's
yet.
watering down her own proposal, and all you have to do then is take one of those guns that's banned under this feel-good legislation that wouldn't work at all. You make some minor adjustments to it, and suddenly that gun that was illegal 5 minutes ago is now illegal, unless you take away all the existing guns in America, which you can't do, okay? You're just not going to do it, and just wipe away the Second Amendment. You're not going to get to the heart,
This has nothing to do with the
this
Second
matter.
Amendment.
It certainly does.
Why did we become a nation that said, if it's too hard to do it, we're not going to do it? Because that's exactly what we're saying about gun control. There might be a loophole here. There might be guns that are now legal that would become illegal. It's too hard to figure it out, so we're not going to do it. That is not the America that our founding fathers and founding mothers envisioned for us. They envisioned a group of people, a community, a nation that would be willing to take tough stances and make tough decisions for the betterment of all.
The opening words of the Second Amendment refer to a well-regulated militia. They do not refer to a totally unregulated band of killers who can get any weapon they want. These gun magazines that shoot 50 to 60 bullets a minute, those aren't protected by any amendment in the Constitution. The only purpose is to kill large numbers of people. It absolutely is.
A national survey was done.
I don't care about your national surveys that the NRA does.
Because Denise, for the second week in a row, has said, we don't need these guns. People don't need to have these
We
guns.
don't.
I'm just telling you what gun owners say. 49% of them say they use
Who
it for
cares?
target. They're the gun owners. They're telling you.
The people who have magazines that will kill 50 or 60 people in a minute.
49% say it's for target shooting. About a quarter
So
say
what?
say it's for hunting, and a quarter say it's for personal protection.
You can
What
also
difference
I
target
think
does it
those are
make?
all legitimate uses.
You can
What
also
difference does it
target
make?
shoot. You don't need a semi-automatic weapon to target shoot.
Well,
you don't
what, are all those
need
people
it.
numbskulls?
You don't need it. Now, I'm not saying they're numbskulls, Kevin, but I am saying that to use that poll is a false way of taking a look at what's being said. Because that poll did not.
I think it's one in a number of facts that is lost on people that only want to use this moment and politicize this event to advance their agenda
you know what?
through emotion.
You know what? Tell me why, as a country, we should not feel emotional about the deaths of 26
We
people.
all do.
Tell me why, as a country,
all
we
do.
should
That
not
side
take a
of the-
look.
that side of
Tell
the
me, I'm
studio
not
doesn't
finished
feel-
yet.
doesn't
Tell me
feel
why,
any
as a
worse
country,
than this
we
side.
should not figure out that we need to do whatever we need to do to protect the lives of our children and our community.
Absolutely, but
and to throw out, as you did with Dianne Feinstein's bill, to say it's already weakened down because there are loopholes in it, is baloney. It's the out you're looking for, and you found it.
we all
If
care.
you can't
We
buy
all care.
50 or 60 round magazines, you can't shoot 50 or 60
We
people.
all
in a
care
minute.
about. We're deeply saddened about what happened, but
not
we want to
saddened enough
do.
to
We
take
want to do
a
what's
stand.
right and what's effective, and not enact knee-jerk solutions that will not work.
We talk about this every
Because-
time there's a shooting. It's not knee-jerk.
Because we won't be back until after the first of the year, let's lighten things up just a little bit and take a few minutes to talk about some of our hopes and dreams for the coming year. What do we want? What do we need? Peace and prosperity for sure, but maybe another Super Bowl would be nice too.
Badger win. That's probably somewhere on my list, but it's not my highest priority. I'd like to see a lot more genuine conversation coming in this upcoming year, where people can have civil conversations about policy. Our legislators at both the state and federal level, and even to some degree here at the local level and in county government in particular, where we've had more contentiousness and certainly not more thoughtfulness when it comes to policy discussions. I'd certainly like to see safer communities, especially here in Milwaukee and in my hometown of Chicago. I read the Chicago Trib. I'm just devastated every day when I see some of the things that happen there. I've got a young nephew that goes to high school there, and I worry every day that he's going to be in some kind of peril going to and from school. So those are the kinds of things that I would like to see.
What do you hope for?
I'm actually very positive and very hopeful. First of all, on this issue that we're talking about, concrete action is going to be taken this year because I've never seen a political commitment to do it before in my lifetime. And it's not a fleeting thing, I don't believe. I believe there are serious people talking about this, conservatives as well as liberals, and I'm real positive of that. The election gave me a positive outlook on this coming year, believe me. The fact that the president was reelected, and we can look down now and see that we're going to stop trying to dismantle the improvement to health care. That's going to add 30 million people receiving health care that haven't received it before. We have a case before the Supreme Court that many people think is quite likely to result in the Supreme Court affirming marriage equality in this nation, which I just when you see the movement toward rights and positive solutions to the kinds of problems we've had, I'm just very hopeful for this coming year. I really am.
What do you hope for?
Greater respect, period. Civility, greater respect for one another, greater respect for one another's property, greater respect for human life. I would like to see us rein in federal spending. I think it could be, very catastrophic for our country, which could become Greece next year unless we get a control on an out-of-control situation. More global warming, especially when I see what's already starting to happen outside. Bring on the global warming, all right? And hey, one more thing, very quickly. I would like to lose about 20 to 25 pounds so that I could keep up with my daughter who turns 4 in March.
Hey,
It's a tough job.
I would like to see our politicians begin to realize that collaboration and cooperations are not words that are said with disdain, but are the way and the actions in which they work to do the people's business, and that they also recognize that it is the people's business, not one party, not one ideology, but the people's business, and that politicians will remember why they were elected, not to represent one party, but to represent all of us as a community. And as a community, I would like to be able to see us be able to discuss tough issues that we face without feeling like we have to take one side or the other, but to have a good discussion.
All right. Some further thoughts now on the horrible events of this past week and on an interchange tradition that fell by the wayside this year. Here's Rick Horowitz to explain. Rick.
I was sure I'd be singing by now. Actually, I was getting ready to sing last week, my annual holiday medley of funny tunes about politics and such. And then the news arrived from Newtown, the unfathomable news about the unspeakable violence at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Or maybe I should call it the unsingable violence, because I suddenly had to speak about it, had to say something about it right then. What I couldn't do, or even try to do, was sing my way past Sandy Hook as if it hadn't happened. Funny tunes when so many little children lay lifeless, lay bloodied and broken in their classrooms? Couldn't do it. I'd wait a week, I decided. I'd wait till this week. Well, this week's here, and I still can't do it. There's just no song in me this week. And this is strange, I know, but I'm trying to take some hope from that, some shred of hope in this normally hope-filled season. I'm hoping that this time, unlike all those other times, those feelings will last, not just in me, but in other people too. Feeling heartsick, frustrated, furious. I'm hoping that those feelings last long enough to do something constructive with them rather than simply move on. Here's what else I'm hoping. I'm hoping we'll call out the people who dismiss any attempt to confront a decades-old problem as politicizing, as a knee-jerk response. You might be right about the jerk part, but only if they're looking in the mirror. I'm hoping that our country's many hunters, solid citizens, nearly every one, will try to remember the last time they needed 30 shots to bring down a deer. I'm hoping that all thoughtful gun owners will think again about whether our nation's most precious freedom is their right to blast away without even the slightest interruption or inconvenience at tin cans and clay pigeons and paper silhouettes. I'm hoping we'll reject the hypocrisy of those who'll stop at nothing to prevent even one fraudulent ballot from being cast, but who insist that preventing dozens, even hundreds of gun deaths somehow isn't worth the effort. I'm hoping we'll finally stand up to the merchants of death in the killing machine industry and to their shills in politics and in the media. I'm hoping we'll realize that not every regulation equals socialism, that not every law is a slippery slope to tyranny. What I'm hoping, to put it simply, is that we'll find the will in this new year ahead to value most what matters most.
By the way, immediately following this program tonight, Friday night, there will be a 1-hour PBS special on the tragedy. Thank you so very much for watching. Stay warm, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and have an absolutely wonderful holiday break.